Tom, really appreciate you carving out some time for us today.
Hi, Mark. Thanks so much for having me on. Huge fan of the book and the show and all that you come with. So, yeah, really honored to be on.
Well, listen, likewise. And, I know a lot of listeners will be already familiar with you and your work, but I think it'd be great to give everybody else, particularly in North America, a little whirlwind tour of your background, if you could.
I'll keep it to the short version because there's certainly nothing too extravagant in there. I just call myself a performance specialist. Been working in the industry over 20 years now. I think 24th year I'm in, showing my age a little bit. But I'm certified nutritionist, certified strength and conditioning specialist, work primarily in elite sport with football. I'm currently head of performance at Sheffield United Football Club. I'm also the founder of Hero Pro, which is a nutrition app that has done quite well in pro sport, but also corporate well-being. And I've recently become a debut author with my book, The Colour Fit Method, which the nutrition app is based on.
Amazing. Well, we're definitely going to dive into that. And, I'd love to start things off by just talking about, your career. Can you walk us through, the early days in the career? What are some of the challenges that stick out, some of those lessons learned that, when looking back now, you think, geez, that was beneficial to go through some of those lumps?
Certainly, the main challenge for everyone now is getting a job. And when I tell everyone how I got my job, it makes them absolutely sick to the stomach, given you have to have a master's and so much work experience, etc., to work on the bottom rung. But I'm that old. I actually saw my job advertised in a newspaper. So we're lucky enough to get that. And then that was working through. Main hurdle, certainly when you're first starting in our industry, tends to be pay. It's certainly quite difficult. It's quite polarized. So you're very low on the spectrum until you're not, and then you're very high in the spectrum. Also, working in pro sport, a big hurdle is that you're likely to receive your P45 quite quickly, unfortunately. So that was an earlier barrier as well. But I was fortunate enough to work for a consultancy company at the time because those specialists, sports scientists, performance coaches weren't that established. Certainly in the UK, I know in the US and Canada, it's much more established, the S&C industry by that time. But it was something that came in. As it became more established, obviously, I became offered links with certain specific clubs. So I went down that path.
Yeah.
And the main challenge is, as everyone would face, is that trying to stay up to date with everything. When we first started, you had to be a real generalist. So you were doing everything. I was like half physio, I was a masseur, you'd be the nutritionist, you'd be the sports scientist, but all your sports science. When I first started, the polar heart rate monitors were the cutting edge, and it would take you about half an hour to download each one.
Wow.
So time and reacting to anything in real time certainly didn't exist then. It was kind of all post. So yeah, it was trying to accomplish all the jobs. Now as it gets more and more specialized, the tech's increasing, it's trying to keep up with everything and keep modern and on the edge. And
for sure, if we kind of pin it there for a minute and just talk about your role now at Sheffield, looking back, having to have done all the jobs and now being in charge of a organization where obviously you've got specialists in certain areas that you're going to be bringing on board. How is that, walk me through the mindset there and the change in terms of how you lay out that performance staff?
Well, basically, it's brilliant. I can put my feet up like a big cigar and let all my guys get on with the job because they are absolutely fantastic. So at Sheffield United, I'm lucky enough to head up the performance team, and we've got a dedicated sports scientist, dedicated S&C, dedicated late rehab, and then we have 2 nutritionists on board as well. So they're excellent. And like I mentioned before, I kind of present myself as a generalist when it comes to performance. All my guys, although they have specialization, they are supreme generalists as well. They've worked in all aspects of the job. And that makes my job incredibly easy because they have an appreciation for how all the different departments work and interact, and appreciation for the importance of everybody's roles in there in terms of bouncing off ideas. It allows it to be a real democracy rather than going in and being autocratic as a leader, because everyone has that appreciation and experience for what's going on, able to generate fantastic ideas from everybody that has had different experiences, different knowledges, different biases. And it's just been a joy to come into that field. as a leader, obviously, you've got to adapt what you're going to do. And it's about generally providing clarity, supporting everyone in your department as much as possible, audits, clear goals, tasks derived, and the likes. Very different from how I first started. Really challenging, lots of learning and CPD around leadership and how to motivate and drive a team. But it's, I think, at its heart, it's about that clarity that might change from time to time, but it's having clear direction for your team about what you want to achieve, how you're going to achieve it, when you're going to achieve it, and then actually executing those ideas. We can spend like months and months and years coming up with what is our culture, coming up with these buzzwords and spending ages. It doesn't really matter. It's about what are you doing. You can spend too much time on trying to make these things perfect. You've got to be right. We've got a good idea. We've got a good establishment on the direction we want to go. Let's start executing these ideas. So, for example, at the moment, we're generating an individual development plan for each one of our players. So everyone, a coaching staff and a performance staff, has been allocated to a certain group of players, and we've been gathering lots of information on them through questionnaires. We've got them to write a success story for themselves in the future, canvassing coach and performance staff, and then we're generating all that into a performance plan, giving them clear direction on where we think they can benefit the best, whether it be strengths or a weakness, and then again, it's executing all those ideas. And we're fortunate enough to be able to do that really well because we've got the staff to do it and we've got the coaching staff to do it, and we have got that clarity in what we want to do.
Yeah, it's tremendous when you can see problems through another practitioner's eyes, so that everything isn't a nutrition problem, or the S&C doesn't always think everything's a strength problem, and the sports scientist, everyone has their biases, but to be able to see it through the lens of the different practitioners is such a benefit. If we look at a couple of things I want to touch on, that maybe circling back to that success story piece. Obviously, mindset plays a big role in performance. Is that something that through the performance psychologist side of things, or what brought that about, of having the players kind of really outline what success means for them?
Yeah, at the moment, because it is one of the bigger performance roles that I've got into, I'm trying to just swallow a leadership book every week. So I'm coming up with lots of principles from lots of different areas at the moment. But I think psychology most comes down to common sense. You're never coming up with anything that is absolutely groundbreaking, and you had to be incredibly innovative to bring it up or develop a new basis of science. It's all very, very commonsensical. It's about doing these common sense things well and doing it in a good order and doing it in a good time frame and making it accountable and achievable, all these, etc. So I don't think there's anything too great. It's just having a really good knowledge of that, the specifics of your environment, where they are, where the budget allows, what your core values are as an organization, as a whole organization, not just as a performance team, and really aligning yourself as much as possible, depending on the type of sport, but within football or soccer, as you like to call it.
Yeah.
Performance mainly comes down to your tactical and technical objectives. Physicality is a subsidiary of those elements. So you really have to have that very, very clear alignment with the technical and tactical desires and overall ethical approach from the coaches. So it's getting that really close alignment in terms of goals, in terms of language use, in terms of structures. And again, coming into this team, I've been super fortunate that we're all housed, the medical, the coaching staff, the performance staff, they're all housed in the same offices. So it allows it to be holistic very easily, and we're able to bounce ideas off each other.
Yeah, it's interesting psychology when you say that. You think back of 2,000 years ago, a lot of these, sayings or principles were already established or thought of or written down. And of course, we're sort of circling back and getting more granular with them. So that's really interesting.
Yeah, I'm doing a massive disservice psychology, by the way. There,
yeah, there is a lot of cutting edge new science as well. So
disrespectful, bastard. But there's certainly neuroscience and the likes. That is like if you read,
help to clarify where to direct your attention.
Think slow and blue line thinking, the high performance podcast book, all things like that. They go into real in-depth levels of how we think and react and are emotive beings and the likes. But I think when it comes down to principles of outlaying those kind of highly scientific areas, again, they're fairly commonsensical in the end.
For sure. And when I recently had Dr. Emma Tester from Tottenham on, and her speaking about the coaching staff deciding to shift in terms of their, new coaching staff came in, they decided to pivot in terms of how they view nutrition. And of course, she then had to, overhaul what they were doing. And so I'm curious, from your point of view, you mentioned there, obviously everyone having the similar values or, moving in the same direction. Obviously with coaches, that's always the last sort of line. And it can be challenging at times to really be able to line up exactly with the performance staff and what you want to get accomplished. Can you speak to that a little bit of just what are some of the potential challenges you've seen maybe along the way before your time even at Sheffield of trying to communicate with the coach or to really be able to support what the coach is trying to do with the players?
So as I said before, kind of alignment of their language and wants. So a big thing at Sheffield United is that we play at high intensity, and physicality is going to be a huge factor in how we perform. We've shown clear correlations between our high intensity distances and how we're performing as a unit. Things like a high press and the likes that require these high intensity physicals have been shown to be really prominent in our kind of good performance. As well to that, we're looking at this season because of the Winter World Cup. We've got a ridiculous game fixtures as you're used to in basketball. We're playing 3 games a week, every single week. So then are we aligning those high intensity demands that are completely regular to our nutritional elements? And how can we sell nutrition through that football vision goal? And then it becomes a lot easier. So things that easy relate to that are around carbohydrate periodization and making sure we're getting sufficient carbohydrate stores to fuel that high intensity that we've said so important. Are we maximizing our recovery strategies because we know that game is coming again? And that's around a whole food approach from a supplemental approach as well. And the list just goes on. So it's about how do we get that buy-in for the specific objectives of the whole bigger picture, and then how can we do that from a more specific frame point from nutrition? And those are the things that have just jumped to my mind very easily. Yeah. There's lots more going on with the nutrition in terms of, like I said, recovery and health. But the big blocks that we're trying to sell to the players at the moment is making sure that before every game we've had sufficient carbohydrate stores. And then we're also approaching a little bit at the moment about the appropriate approach for our substitutes. Because there's so many games, the governing body has increased the amount of substitutes that you can have. So you can pick up to 7, 5 of those that can come on. But we want them to have a slightly different approach when it's close to game. So we always want them to maximize their carbohydrate stores because they could be on after a couple of minutes, and therefore that's important. But do those players need the same approach whether they come on or they don't come on during the game? So should they be having, so for example, you'll see players snacking on Haribos and things like that during the game. If they're substitutes and they're doing that several times a week, that's perhaps going to be inappropriate in terms of calorie consumption, in terms of sugar consumption that might lead to body composition problems. So again, it's framework, it's bigger picture, and then it's developing tasks, whatever specific for that kind of point of performance or sports science.
Yeah, I mean, those compressed windows are obviously really key areas in the schedule to try to get right and get an advantage. And you're talking about this year with the World Cup being in the winter time, which it isn't normally, and now the schedule being more compressed. I mean, imagine this sort of fits in with a lot of the principles in the book around, you mentioned periodizing carbohydrate. If we talk about some examples, what are some of the strategies you might use to try to get some of your players up to that 6, 7, sometimes 8 grams per kilo of carbohydrate, depending on how many minutes they're logging, is there certain things around liquid forms or the post-training meals, and how are you adjusting some of those factors?
First of all, we don't get our players anywhere near 8 grams per kilogram. So I'd like to be upfront and honest that I don't think many footballers will get near that. There's still a degree of carb phobia that's out there, but we are tackling it. And I think we tend to get around the 5 to 6 grams per kilogram. And certainly the supplements that can help around that are quite concentrated, that we would advise the day before a game and on the morning of a game, that can certainly help. With post recovery, obviously that's an excellent window. It's been shown you don't have to get in that 1 to 2 hour window. The GLUT4 heightened receptors will stay there for a good while, but it's just convenient, and it works to have kind of, I use Matt Jones's he's at West Ham, nutritionist at West Ham, his kind of 4-phase approach, where it has opportunities immediately after the game, the snack that they take away with them, the main meal, and also the snack before they go to bed. And we're looking to get the right amount of carbohydrates and protein. So we're looking about 1 to 1.2 kilograms per body weight of carbohydrates, about 0.4 grams per kilogram of protein. And then the fat tends to take care of itself. But one of the main reasons I came up with the Colour Fit concept was I was trying to promote carb periodization to our players. It's without doubt the best way to go for somebody that's got to train harder, compete regular. The fantastic work by Burke showed quite clearly, if we do that, so basically carb periodization, very simple, just increase your amount of carbohydrates around hard training and competition, and decrease them when it's less. And then by that way, you can get your performance when it needs to be there. You can also keep a good lean body composition, and you can also stay healthy by when you're not competing at those high levels. You're going to decrease the amount of carbohydrate and promote foods that are going to promote being healthy and promote having a lean body composition. So it's kind of holy triad. But what I actually found with my players were they're having a real polarized approach to carb periodization, and it was rather unhealthy, I'd say, lacking in whole foods and the like. So what I'd see is around hard training competition, lots of refined grains and processed foods, so the likes of high sugar content, high refined grain content, so just your white breads, your pastas, your cereals, lots of bars and the like. And when they were coming away from it, the ones that did decrease the carbohydrate, they kind of went to a really, what I typically saw was a super high protein approach, where there was lots of meat and eggs and things like that, bars and the like, and they were just avoiding whole foods that we're trying to promote to them. And whole foods are a bit more tricky because they're a bit of a blend of the macronutrients.
Sure.
But if we promote those foods to them, they're going to get the right macros that we want, but they're also getting all the fantastic things that come with whole foods, your vitamins,
micronutrients,
phytonutrients, your fiber, your good fats that are going to have huge benefits to all areas of health and performance. So they're the ones that we want to try and promote, but they just found that more tricky. So my line of thinking was, right, how can I shape meals so they intuitively and simply know what to go for? And the first point of call was, right, can we group meals into these broad categories that footballers, but anybody is interested in? So 1, performance; 2, body composition; and 3, health. We thought carbohydrates can go quite easily into performance because they're our most efficient fuel source. So if we can rely on them mainly, we're going to be a bit faster, we're going to be a bit more efficient. We thought there could be arguments around this, but for body composition, we went with protein because it's really important for staying lean, because it has a high satiety, has the lowest net calories, it can help boost your metabolism. Also, if you want to increase muscle mass, it's key as your building blocks for muscle if you want to get bigger from an athletic frame point. And then health is a bit more complex, but we came up with this concept called the health score that was super objective. So that quantified your RDAs of your important vitamins, your minerals, your fibers, and your fats and the likes that we've already talked about. So we divided that into kind of a pie chart, and then we give it an intuitive name, an icon, and a color that made it really simple, that was a right constitution of meal for your goal. I
Yeah.
appreciate this is very visual, so it might be hard to kind of visualize. And then we also, obviously, we realized that calories are also important. So we invented a real intuitive layer to that called the calorie load gauge. And that's sat on the outside of the pie chart. And thankfully enough, that all looked like a plate. So we called it the Colour Fit plate. And that seemed to work really well. All we were saying to the players was what we call performance fuel was green. So we were saying to the players, when you're coming up to training or hard game, look for a bit more green on your Colour Fit plate and a bit higher calorie loads. And when you're not, a bit less green, a bit more of what we called health or lean muscle, and lessen the calories down to more moderate levels. And that, like I said, you'll achieve all those things of being able to perform when you want, stay nice and lean, and be super healthy.
Yeah, it's great to have those heuristics, even, as you know, for professional athletes who are busy, they have a lot of demands, and how can we, on the one end, you can have the practitioner who has an idea of grams per kilo, but at the same time, we can accomplish the same thing by having just a general heuristic and view of the plate like you provide here, which then achieves the outcome without necessarily having to overburden even the athlete. And of course, staff or whomever can have more of the back end numbers, but
certainly doesn't have to be the Colour Fit plate as well. I'd like to say I'm doing disservice to my book and sales and everything, but there's loads of examples out there, and I just adapted what's a Colour Fit plate from ideas that already existed with the government healthy plates that you see around the world that framework meals into different goals as well. So it's more along your vegetables and salads, your protein sources, and then more your starchy carbohydrate sources in there as well. So it can be approached from multiple planes. It doesn't have to be specific for what I've done. I just thought that was the most intuitive layer, because beyond just having the names, it has the colours, it has the icons. So even it came about from my 6-year-old son being near me when I was designing it, and he knew the objective of all the different meals. So we went with that.
Nice. Yeah. And again, just being able to see those, the plate sizes like you do, like you partition is great for athletes, because it shows, hey, half your plate should be, or 2/3 of your plate needs to be this. And so that's a really easy way to highlight to them if they're not getting enough, and as well as obviously the different food elements, which you cover in the book. And, for yourself with working with the nutrition staff, is there, a focus around game days of more of the rices and the pastas, or more of the dense carbohydrates? Is it more just, appealing to even the palates of the players to make sure that they're getting some of the foods and things that they enjoy? How do you balance those things out?
Appeal and taste has to be first and foremost. Players in particular and athletes tend to be emotional beings, so you have to have that buy-in from sight. We first eat with our eyes. Obviously, taste is super important in there as well. And there's lots of ways you can kind of encourage people to go follow the kind of macronutrient principles that you're going to lay out. So layout of your food is quite important, and obviously the content of the food. So we'd go, as we're approaching match day or hard training day, we'd certainly have more whole grains in there, and we would have more starchy vegetables in there as well. And we try and section out food service into kind of goals as you're going along. So we try and group those elements together. So we're saying, guys, today this is the one where you should be having, you can say it in any way. So you could be saying 2 fists, half a plate, whatever it be, all those reference methods of when they should be up. So we have a graphic on the TV, depending on what match day minus it is, for the recommendations of the plate.
Nice.
Got posters in there. Obviously, we've educated them themselves, and then it's about the layout of the foods over the different meals as well, relating to your different choices. So, and the chefs are aware as well. Say it's a match day -1, and somebody comes in and just asks for a cheese and ham and omelette for the breakfast. The chefs know to say, no, that's not appropriate, and recommend an overnight oats, a porridge, pancakes and fruit, whatever it may be, muesli, to try and achieve the objectives that we're trying to do, which pisses off the players.
Well, that sounds like you got a pretty good rapport then with the performance staff and the chefs. I mean,
Chefs
talk
are
to
the
me about that.
ones, when you find a good chef, just cling on to them like the first love of your life, because a good chef is everything, I'd say. They bring all your nutritional ideas to life, and a good chef will be able to present good taste, good aesthetics, good knowledge of groupings of the food, being able to handle the budgetary requirements, which is quite big when it comes to feeding a huge team in there. But that aesthetics and that taste, if you don't have those layers of it, food should be a joy. It's about, there's so much of the socialization and psychology that happens around your kitchen within sports teams. They're there before training, they're there after training, all the time. Some chefs travel with the teams as well. So it's a huge factor on the overall kind of performance and social structure of a team. So if you get a good chef, like I say, and performance chefs are becoming more and more an integral part of a performance team now. But if I get one now, I tell them I love them every single day, and please stay with me.
It is amazing how compliance is the ultimate equalizer for compliance, isn't it? Because if the food tastes great, then the athlete all of a sudden is on board, whereas if it isn't, it can be challenging. And you know, you go through in the book a lot of different recipes for drinks and things. Obviously, getting carbohydrate intake up to some of the levels that you're looking for, that's a really nice way on the liquid side. What are some of the popular ones with the guys at Sheffield or throughout your career that you've noticed with the players?
From a liquid point of view?
Yeah, like drinks, smoothies, that type of thing.
It is becoming more and more prevalent these days. And my experience of it is the kind of like the more health-based shooter type shots almost. So there's ones that you can buy, so like the likes of turmeric and ginger and all these things have come in, but you can obviously make them yourselves from good vegetable juices, and obviously a skilled chef in terms of brewing certain concoctions. So like getting your doing your turmeric with curcumin and your black peppers and your vitamin C's and the like, they all kind of work together to increase the potent nutrients that help with inflammations and the like. So they tend to like those kind of shooters in the morning.
Nice.
Rich array of kind of smoothie bowls, or actually smoothies. So if you vary them, they tend to work well. Really vibrant colours, so all kind of your berry type colours, your green type colours, just automatically relate themselves to health. But it's that knowledge of how to make them healthy but still taste absolutely incredible as well. Knowledge of how to get a bit of protein in there as well. So it's the main source of your breakfast. You're just not getting more kind of your carbohydrate as a macronutrient, even though there's lots of other things in there in terms of things that are good for you as well. But clever use of spices as well, things like cinnamon, vanilla and the likes, they make them super appealing, but also incredibly healthy for you at the same time. We mentioned inflammation. Both those spices relate to inflammation and lots of other benefits as well. And obviously liquid, when athletes don't have much of an appetite after they've worked really hard, or they've come out of strength training. So obviously whey protein that goes into a lot of the shakes, that's the fastest form of getting our amino acids into the body. And also can be a really condensed format of carbohydrates, and having that kind of fructose and glucose blend in there as well can maximize the transportation of carbohydrates back into the muscles and the liver, just to promote that quick recovery. So liquids do come into there quite a lot, but food first all the time. There can be problems with liquids in terms of it's sometimes just viewed as a snack or something that I'll just add on to my diet, and they can be quite calorific. So you need to be wary of them, particularly getting the likes of things like avocado going in there and nuts and seeds going in there. All of a sudden, you could be looking at something that's easy in the kind of 400 plus calorie range. So sometimes you do have to proceed with caution.
You need to know who you're talking about in the context, right? Whether they're a starter, substitute, worrying about body composition. You know, obviously that context matters. Now, what about picky eaters? You know, every team, especially the young athletes that come in, it's a challenge. Obviously, it sounds like you've got a great environment that you set up. You've got the performance chefs, the food's tremendous. And so that's likely going to pull them towards, but is there challenges that you've experienced, whether in the past or now, you know, when you get that young athlete on board who just really struggles to get enough, whole food, good food on the plate?
Yeah, constant bloody challenges. And it always comes down to vegetables. That is the main one. I had it with my 16-year-old daughter. They're just young men. They're used to kind of a bit of a refined, highly processed diet, and their taste buds have changed, adapted to high salt, high sugar, high refined grains and the like. So they can find vegetables incredibly bland when it comes to eating them. But that's when it becomes about the cooking skills. So obviously the cooking skills of the chef, but it's about they're in charge of their nutrition. The vast majority of the time, they're looking after themselves. And they can be, these young men are just thrown into the big, bad, wide world. They could have come through an academy or a kind of boarding structure where all the meals are provided to them.
Taken care of.
All of a sudden, they signed for a club as a pro. They're 18-year-olds, have got all this money, but they've never cooked anything for themselves in the kitchen. So one, it's scary. Two, they don't have the skills. Three, they're affluent enough to go out and eat all the time.
Uber Eats,
it's a huge problem. So then it becomes about education of that individual. And that's where the big change with ColourFit came about, was when we started making video demonstrations for every meal to actually show to eat healthily and eat tastily. It's not that complex. It can be really easy, and it's key meals as well if you're starting off. So things that nice and simple that you can make a huge different variety of very easily. So they're not just copying from a recipe all the time. So meals that lend itself to this type of structure are like stir fries, casseroles, tray bakes and the like. There's loads of ways that you can build that to suit your goal, and you can educate them around that, but also make the vegetables within that meal incredibly tasty. And that is just coming down again to a little bit of knowledge around herbs and spices. But they can also buy a lot of pre-packaged ones now that are pretty healthy. You have to be aware there are some bad ones out there, but modern market,
good place to start for a lot of young athletes.
It's so health focused these days that there's a huge market out there in there. So you can buy your pre-prepared kind of sauces, spreads, marinades, whatever it be, that are going to make those vegetables taste really well. And it can be cooking techniques as well. So if we're roasting vegetables and the like, it can bring out their natural sweetness a lot more. So the skills within the cooking that we can teach them, but really simple. Start simple, really easy recipe ideas, and provide them either with kind of cooking lessons. You can do that on site, or really simple, you can do a video for them. Anybody can start a WhatsApp group or do it on a cloud drive, where you'd say Google Drive, where they can just link to these videos, access them for free anytime. It's kind of monkey see, monkey do, visually appealing again. And that, like I say, those video demonstrations for me have been the biggest jump in our adherence to players just giving it a go.
Amazing. Well, listen, I want to circle back to one of the things you talked about around kind of food being about emotion and joy, because it's challenging sometimes to balance out the outcomes we're looking to get as a performance nutrition staff, and still keeping this sense of, the dining table, the dining room is not another area where the player is being assessed and everything else like the rest of their day. So how do you guys balance that? Is there certain, outings you might go on, or you've alluded to even this the culture with the chefs and whatnot, but how do you kind of balance that out of keeping things kind of fun and light when it comes to nutrition, because it can get to be another area where an athlete feels like they're being assessed by what's on their plate?
And it sounds like it's like that as if the chefs are telling them off what they're having for breakfast, but I assure you it isn't that. My thing with nutrition is it's about being in the right ballpark most of the time. If you're super over prescriptive, you're weighing your foods, etc. I know that's necessary for some athletes, whether it be a weight category athlete or a bodybuilder and the like, an aesthetic athlete. But in the main, it isn't required, long as you've got a good natural gauge for what's going on. So again, you hear these rules like an 80-20 rule. So eat right 80% of the time, and you can have a bit more freedom 20% of the time. And like I said, food, it can bring so much joy. It's about enjoyment. It's one of life's great things. So it's having that balance about doing the right thing, but also being loose enough to sometimes allow them chocolate or birthdays to bring certain treats in and the likes. But again, healthy food can be tasty if you do it right. So you can get the best of both worlds as long as those cooking skills are right, and you make them visually appealing. You have that variety in what you're presenting to them. You might focus on kind of different types of cuisines on certain days.
Yeah,
and I can't take the credit for this. Our nutritionist Lee Rijkaards came up with this, and we did have on birthdays that players brought in cakes and donuts and whatever they wanted, just basically treats.
Yeah,
and we told them we wanted to change that. That went down like a fart in a lift, certainly. But what he did instead was that he said, right, when it's your birthday, tell us what your favourite foods are or your favourite type of cuisine. And on that day, we're going to cook that type of food. Nice. So this is quite new, and we've had a couple of birthdays since, and it's gone down an absolute storm.
Amazing.
The first two guys were kind of Caribbean-based food.
Yeah.
I've got to tell you, it was absolutely incredible. And the lads just bought into it so much when it actually happened. I had plantain for the first time in my life, and that was like, where has this been all my life?
Delicious, right?
Absolutely amazing taste. And I was like, this is incredible. And like I said, all the guys bought into it so much. So I think like the feedback from that sort of stuff will be a great more detail from now on, because we're a bit kind of sketchy and vague about it at first, still a bit upset about not having the donuts, but from now on it was a huge success.
Nice, man. Plantains get the carbohydrate density up and all that potassium. Well done. If we pivot a little bit here, Tom, and just talk about some of the metrics you might collect to inform that the player's on the right path. So whether it's body composition metrics, whether it's, blood testing, what are some of the things that you might be looking at to ensure that your players are, adapting well and player health is on point?
Yeah, we have quite a big testing regime, and bloods is part of that. So the typical things that they're looking at, and maybe get individual supplementation. There's iron is certainly one, vitamin D is one, vitamin B12. So we do supplement if anyone's short of that. And then we do the body composition test just with skin fold calipers. So we look at that and obviously set the guys' targets. But I'm a big one for just looking at the players and looking if they look lean. I think with skin fold calipers, certain athletes, mesomorphs, it can be a bit unkind to. I like to call them skinny fat men, because when you're taking the caliper readings, you tend to get quite a lot of muscular tissue, and they just don't have the kind of makeup where the cutaneous fat tissue will just slide off the muscle. It just kind of sticks there in one thick box, even though there isn't that much tissue there. So I'm one. We also take pictures of the lads, and what we've decided to do is have a picture on their locker that it represents them perhaps not the best body competition, and one we've just took one recently at the end of pre-season where they're all looking pretty good, to be honest. But we've done that in a way that really pimped them up to look good. So we had nice lighting, we got the media guys in to take it. And then to take pride in that. And again, it's one of our core ethoses that we want to have a lean team, not just because the effects of just being lean, but the psychology of being athletic. When all the guys are looking around, they know everybody within that squad is super athletic. There's effects on injury prevention. So it's obviously a gravity-based sport. So there's all the loading metrics that comes with having unnecessary body mass. Relates to lifestyle. So lifestyle of anything to do with inflammation, sleep, organ health, and the like that comes from, it's not just being lean, but it's around those things of having a healthy diet that incorporate, does promote being lean. Because I'd say to anyone, if they need to be lean, what is the primary thing to do? Is have a healthy diet. I could down that avenue along, but I won't do that. But yeah, I'd say they'd be the main ones that we'd look at in terms of testing and just kind of culture and observational stuff as we're going along.
Tremendous. Well, as we get towards the end here, I'm curious to pick your brain. If we shift gears a little bit on the mental health side, in sport, mental health is obviously much more awareness around it. And of course, the athletes are under a microscope that's completely different than even 10 years ago, but definitely 20 years ago. So just curious your thoughts around, what you see the top flight of football or even down through the academies of player mental health, and where maybe some of the gaps are that we can do a little bit more in terms of supporting.
I'm certainly not an expert in mental health, but yeah, there are a lot of pressures on these young men, and you look in society of whole, happiness seems to be on the decline, and suicide. And again, that's a whole rabbit hole that we could go down with social media, and social support, and how we were designed to communicate and be kind of community structures. And that's become a bit analog rather than human interaction. But I keep on going back to our core philosophies. But honestly, one of our core philosophies is about enjoyment. So we're always looking for avenues on how we can maximize enjoyment, whatever we're doing. So if it's fun aspects of training, making the warm-up more fun, making the kind of speed training kind of competitive all the time, having these little games before we get going, head tennis and the likes in there, the environments where they are kind of enjoyable as possible. So music when we're doing our prehab and our strength training, and we get the players to choose different tracks for different days. So again, it's always kind of their buy-in, what we're doing. And I think free time is a big thing, because I've discussed about how busy our schedule and how busy our training schedule is. Can you come with a compromise sometimes so they do get time with themselves and time when their families are off? Because a lot of the time, because say, for example, you're playing Saturday and Tuesday, you don't typically be in on that Sunday to maximize recovery and train the group that didn't perform in the game. But we've come up with a system where perhaps not all the time that we have to do that. So post game, can we do a big training session with all the guys that have not been involved, cover off this training, cover off football, cover off the conditioning. And then when the guys are off, we've actually come up with this 100 points protocol, where at home they could do a lot of recovery strategies that we will promote, things like recovery pumps, ice baths, protein drinks, compression garments and the like. And they're all worth different points depending on how effective they are.
Okay.
And they're going to send us pictures on WhatsApp and things like that to prove that they've been doing that. So this is fairly novel, but we're hoping that does work, and we're going to monitor it in terms of how well we're performing on a Tuesday and discussions with the players as we go on. But I think when you can give free time and when you can be economical with your training, so for example, kill two birds with one stone, just use your most effective training formats and kind of trim the unnecessary bits that you might add on the side. I think that spare time and time with the families is key, because say if we're in on Sunday and we give them Monday off, it's that much use to the player, because his kids are at school, his wife's gone to work, etc. They've just not got that kind of social joy that comes with having time off when most other people are off.
Yeah, it's a great point. And, even developing that autonomy around them taking ownership over some of those recovery strategies. I mean, and being efficient, as you say, is tremendous. And
trust is huge.
Yeah, trust, exactly. Yeah, trusting that. Yeah, exactly. Novel, isn't it? Awesome, Tom. Listen, to wrap things up here, could you give us, if you had a tip to give young practitioners, or, experience for that matter, through your work over the years, what's something you might provide them?
I think so. It's been a philosophy of mine for ages. It's just approach everything to genuinely try and help person, athlete, whoever it may be that you're working with. Don't approach it from kind of showing off your own skill set. So you're being overly busy with someone that it might be. It's just, if your heart is in trying to help someone and whatever it may be, but improve their performance, help them socially, within their mental health. If you're just there as someone that genuinely is trying to help that person, you'll never go far wrong.
Amazing. Well, listen, Tom, I appreciate the time. The book's tremendous. Definitely something with the carbohydrate periodization we use a lot. You've done a fantastic job of the granularity and all the recipes and everything else. I mean, it really does bring it to life. And imagine with on the app, is that where we get the videos and everything else?
Certainly, it's an easy way to get the videos on the app, but the book actually does contain QR video links to every single recipe. So There's over 120 recipes on there, and you just grab your phone, your iPad, whatever it is, pick up the link, and it'll take you to a video demonstration. So that's great. Again, we eat with our eyes, that easy little demonstration. You can see how easy it is get that confidence for everyone. And same with the training section as well. My big thing, make everything as simple and practical as you can. So with the training content, we've come up with something called the training load gauge, which makes the type of training, how hard it's going to be, super intuitive. And then we've got video link demonstrations for all your kind of circuits, your exercises on there to make it super practical as well.
Incredible. Well, listen, great asset to have. I suggest everybody pick it up. And Tom, appreciate you carving out some time. Where's the best place for people to keep in touch with you and stay up to speed with your work?
On the socials, it's at Hero Pro Sports. That's on Insta, Facebook, and Twitter. I'm also Dr. Little Tom on Twitter. On LinkedIn, I'm just my name, Thomas Little. The website for the app is www.heroprosports.com, and the book's available on Amazon and all good bookstores.
Amazing. We'll definitely include all those links, and those links to making the recipes is tremendous. I know we'll have a lot of the coaches in the US college sport definitely taking advantage of those for sure.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. I gained so much from your book as well, Peak. So I highly recommend that as well. It's been a source of learning for me from lots and lots of perspectives.
Well, listen, I appreciate it, and we'll be keeping tabs on you this year. Best of luck in the season.
Thanks very much, Mark. Take care.